Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. Chapter 7. Something nasty in the elevators. Grandma Josephine had stopped screaming now. She had gone rigid with shock. The rest of the group by the bed, including Charlie and Grandpa Joe, had become as still as stone. They dared not move. They dared hardly breathe. And Mr. Wonka, who had swung quickly around to look at when the first scream came, was as dumbfounded as the rest. He stood motionless, gaping at the thing in the elevator, his mouth slightly open, his eyes stretched wide as two wheels. What they all saw was this. It looked more than anything like an enormous egg balanced on its pointed end. It was as tall as a boy and wider than the fattest man. The greenish-brown skin had a shiny, wettish appearance, and there were wrinkles in it, about 3/4 up in the widest part. There were two large round eyes as big as teacups. The eyes were white, but each had a brilliant red pupil at the center. The red pupils were resting on Mr. Wonka. But now they began traveling slowly across to Charlie and Grandpa Joe, and the others by the bed, settling upon them and gazing at them with a cold, malevolent stare. The eyes were everything. There were no features, no nose or mouth or ears, but the entire egg-shaped body itself was moving very, very slightly, pulsing and bulging gently here and there as the skin were filled with some thick fluid. At this point, Charlie suddenly noticed that the next elevator was coming down. The indicator numbers above the door were flashing. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, L for lobby. There was a slight pause. The door slid open, and there, inside the second elevator, was another enormous, slimy, wrinkled, greenish-brown egg with eyes. Now the numbers were flashing above all three remaining elevator doors. Down they came, down, 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 and soon, at precisely the same time, they reached the lobby floor, and the doors slid open. 5 open doors now, 1 creature in each, 5 in all, and 5 pairs of eyes with brilliant red centers, all watching Mr. Wonka and watching Charlie and Grandpa Joe and the others. There were slight differences in size and shape between the 5, but all had the same greenish-brown wrinkled skin, and the skin was rippling and pulsing. For about 30 seconds, nothing happened. Nobody stirred. Nobody made a sound. The silence was terrible. So was the suspense. Charlie was so frightened he felt himself shrinking inside his skin. Then he saw the creature in the left-hand elevator suddenly start to change its shape. Its body was slowly becoming longer and longer and thinner, going up and down toward the roof of the elevator. Not straight up, but curving a little bit to the left, making a snake-like curve that was curiously graceful up to the left, then curling over to the top right, and coming down again in a half circle. Then the bottom end began to grow out as well, like a tail, creeping along the floor to the left, until at last the creature, which had originally looked like a huge egg, now looked like a long, curvy serpent standing up on its tail. Then the one in the next elevator began stretching itself in much the same way, and what a weird, oozy thing it was to watch. It was twisting itself into a shape that was a bit different from the first, balancing itself almost, but not quite, on the tip of its tail. Then the 3 remaining creatures began stretching themselves all at the same time, one each elongating itself slowly upward, growing taller and taller, thinner and thinner, curving and twisting, stretching and stretching, curling and bending, balancing either on the tail or on the head or both, and turned slightly sideways now, so that only one eye was visible. When they had all stopped stretching and bending, this is how they finished up. "Scram!" shouted Mr. Wonka. "Get out quick!" People have never moved faster than Grandpa Joe and Charlie and Mr. and Mrs. Bucket at that moment. They all got behind the bed and started pushing like crazy. Mr. Wonka ran in front of them, shouting, "Scram! Scram! Scram!" And in 10 seconds flat, all of them were out of the lobby and back inside the great glass elevator. Frantically, Mr. Wonka began undoing bolts and pressing buttons. The door of the great glass elevator snapped shut, and the whole thing leaped sideways. They were away. And of course, all of them, including the 3 old ones in the bed, floated up into the air.